All my life, I've slaved in China, in Burma, and in bloody Lucky Pig. We will buy into this perfect house to live in. Just you and me.
Oh my God.
You better run. I'm right behind you, bro.
Oi!
Oi, Robbie!
Hey! What's up, man?
Do me a favour, get rid of the ratty. If you dress a bit better, you wouldn't be in trouble as much.
Is that why you moved out? Me and Dad were holding you down, huh?
What's he saying? I don't know. He only spoke to us in English.
Look, I can't help it if your cousin wants me, bro.
She doesn't want you.
You think you're Muhammad Ali all of a sudden?
Oi, chill, boys, relax.
Uncle. Grace. Your granddaughter's name is Grace. Well, Grace will be happier elsewhere anyway.
I presume you've heard
About what?
the baby. The kidnapping in maternity today.
Yeah, I can't do this anymore. I'm moving to Melbourne next month with Elliot. Idiot. We've been together for 5 years and you still don't care enough to learn his name.
Farah, she's not just my cousin. She's basically my sister. I told her I will always protect you.
I hope in the next life I get to be your daughter again. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And the courage to change the things I can.
All I know is I don't want to be far from home.
Tell us about the early stages of the development of this project. It's an extraordinarily important one, and one that couldn't afford to have any sort of air of falseness about it. It had to be a very truthful telling of these people's stories.
Yes, well, I mean, it came from the ground up. My understanding was, I just saw an ad, seeking culturally linguistically diverse writers / filmmakers / actors from Western Sydney. And I was a writer director. I'd made some short films that had multicultural content, and I lived in Campbelltown. I was from Western Sydney, so I just applied. And at the time, it was sort of couched as a screen project. And we thought that we'd maybe get, a shitty web series that nobody would watch, because at that stage, that's all brown people ever got, from the major funders and major networks. We never got anything people actually wanted to see. And I think they just identified very early on that we were a really strong group, and that we had the potential to make a feature film, which was pretty unprecedented. So my understanding was that it was Sheila Jayadev, who has a background as a film producer, is one of the very few producers of colour working in Australia, having made Ali's Wedding, teaming up with Shakti Sivanathan, who, as well as being a writer and filmmaker in his own right, is also ran a community arts organisation in Western Sydney, which was Curious Work. So they partnered together, pairing his kind of community arts, nurturing talent, proficiency with her ability to get a feature film up. And that's how it all began. I mean, but that's a very prosaic account, really. It was the 8 of us, very, very different, all of us in a room together, having no idea that we were going to make something really beautiful. But I think we always knew from the beginning that the strength in this, and Shakti even said this, it's sort of like, be honest, the specificity, be really specific about your culture. And that's actually what other people, even if they're not from your culture, will respond to. And I think we all honored that.
Well, that's exactly leads to my next point, in that, yes, you're all telling very different stories that are culturally specific and come from experiences that members of those communities have, but there is this universal sort of sense of drama, this universal sense of experience that pulls the anthology together. And anthologies are a dangerous beast. They can go,
absolutely,
the nature of the beast, one ups, one down. But these have this overarching sort of sense of community.
That was extremely organic. So we were really empowered. Just tell whatever story. Forget about how it's going to fit with everybody else's. Don't try too hard to reverse engineer anything fancy. Just tell your story. What's on your mind at the moment? And without really trying, we all told stories about our families. So mine came from a very personal place. This was back in 2015. My father had a stroke and he reverted to his native tongue, which is Bengali, which I don't speak. I'm mixed race. I have a white mother. I didn't grow up with the language. And it was a bit of an unraveling for me. And I was reflecting on how we hadn't really seen this sort of story. A lot of our migrant stories kind of focus on children or young people who are at school and their food smells different or their parents are strict or whatever it might be. But there's a conversation to be had when people reach middle age, when they're caring for elderly parents. And a lot of these decisions that you made as a kind of angry teenager bite you, which is that you know, for many of us, we renounce our parents' culture. We want to be a cool white kid, and we're kind of very embarrassed about our weird parents. I thought that had never been explored before. So that was my very personal story. And, you know, I was very different to a lot of the other writers. I was the only one that was kind of married with kids, you know, so I was sort of dealing with these very middle-aged problems. And but we all very close, like, I mean, just to go back a little bit, I remember going to a slam poetry event in Western Sydney a few years ago, and it was all young people of color. And, you know, if you watched Home and Away, you would think that all young people do is think about sex and drugs and rock and roll, which is just, that's a 55-year-old person's projection and like sick fantasy about what it is to be young. I can tell you that every one of those kids at that slam poetry competition talked about their parents. And through a migrant lens of like honoring our parents and honoring their sacrifice and feeling conflicted about it. So I just feel like finally it was the chance, they took a gamble to tell those sorts of stories that have been existing in this kind of maybe less prestigious format like a slam poetry competition, and in people's, you know, garage bands and whatever, and actually taking it to a big cinematic audience. And it was very brave, but it was the right story to tell, I think. So yeah, without meaning to, we all ended up writing about our families.
That's really fascinating because my wife, also a film reviewer and a film writer, she saw it at the opening night of the Sydney Film Festival. I couldn't go to that screening. I watched it on the laptop a few days ago. She came in as I was watching the film, and she said, "Oh, this is the best section," and it was your section. She said, "This is," and she didn't know that. She didn't know I was interviewing. So, and I agree. And we're not just saying that because I have you here, but it was a story that. How can I put this? It certainly touched upon all those elements that you've just described, the importance of family and the experience of aging parents, which I've gone through in recent years. So it hit a raw nerve with me. In putting that experience in a screenplay and making a small film out of it, is there a catharsis in that? Is that romanticizing the experience too much, or is there a helpful-ness about it?
It was very complicated. My father was alive when I pitched the idea. I wanted to make a film, and it's a work of fiction. I say this very clearly. But I thought this was really unexplored, the kind of bad ethnic daughter who returns to care for her elderly dad. And I just thought, you know, this had never really been explored. What happens to the children who we do the thing, we assimilate and we maybe marry out of our culture, or we get jobs or whatever, but eventually it comes, I just have this idea that eventually it bites you. Eventually, however neatly you assimilate, it will come and haunt you in the end. And that's what happens to her, and that's what's happened to her father. And I thought this was just really interesting. And, you know, I loved that it had this kind of, I pitched on day one of the writer's room, I want to write a story about a woman wwhose father makes a deathbed confession, but it's in his native tongue and she doesn't speak it. It was very kind of Citizen Kane and very kind of King Lear, the bad daughter who returns. And Indian cinema is built on that kind of very operatic, Shakespearean, you know, honor thy parents kind of tropes. And all I wanted to do was valorize the Bengali language, the language that I don't speak, but I hear it being spoken and I hear it sung, and I think it's beautiful. And I wanted to kind of honor that. And then I met Aka, and I don't know what forces brought this together, but there just happened to be a young man who was an actor who spoke really good Bengali, who had 2 Bengali parents. And I knew that he wanted to probably appear in the film because he was an actor and he'd written this sort of young character who was ambivalent about his culture. And I just thought it was just a really perfect moment for my kind of cynical Gen X character to click with his kind of millennial character and share their experience of growing up. And, you know, she's further down the track. He's at the still renouncing, still embarrassed, still wants to be one of the boys, not sure, thinks his parents are strict, embarrassed by his mum ringing him. He's at that point, but she's further along in her journey. Yeah. But, and, you know, I just wanted to put the language on screen. I mean, my father died in 2020, so the film was well under production. It was a fantasy at the time. You know, I don't want to spoil what happens. But this idea that she does something that only she can do, that, you know, gives her father, she sends him home. She sends him back to India in her singing. And, you know, but I was very aware, like, I thought I'd be more wrecked by it. Like, I thought my family, I was really upset and nervous, like, what's my mum going to think and what's my sister going to think? Sure. But they really liked it, and they clocked it was a work of fiction. It is 100% a work of fiction, but it was dealing with what I was dealing with. And I think it's very interesting to hear that from you, because I just think that dealing with aging parents, you know, we've got an aging population, it's going to become more and more prevalent. And I think older people can identify with sort of, you know, and you understand your parents more as you get older. I'm a parent myself now, and I just think, oh my gosh, it's your own comeuppance when you have kids, and, you know, and you realize how awful you were to your own parents. I mean, so yeah, that's my very roundabout way of saying, yes, I honestly just wanted to explore these issues because they were unexplored, and I thought it was interesting. And I thought it dovetailed beautifully with Arca's section. That's all it was. But yes, it is cathartic, because I gave my father the death he didn't have, you know.
They were beautiful scenes. It's an extraordinarily beautiful moment in the film. So congratulations on that. How would you hope the film to be received by the populations, the communities that are represented in the film? If when they come up to you after the screenings and they look you in the eye, what do you hope they say?
Oh, we've had a lot of love. I get the film isn't even out yet, and I get DMs from often young people of color every day saying, you know, I loved your film, or your film really touched a nerve for me. I don't speak my parents' language, blah, blah, blah. I think most people just enjoy that they're being seen. I mean, we don't have, we never get films like this. You know, we pay our taxes too. We pay our taxes to Screen Australia and the ABC, as well as people of colour, as people from Western Sydney, and we never get that reflected back to us. So I feel like people know this is a bit of a turning point, where it's not just about keeping your head down and being grateful to be in Australia. Like, that narrative has passed. It's about claiming our space and demanding to be heard. It's the new generation, and I think people know that it's very overdue. You know, as groundbreaking as this film is, like I say, it's overdue. But the biggest thing I get, I mean, I just say, my thing is, I just want people to learn their parents' language. That's it. You know, but I just think I want people to be excited. This is a really new film. This is it's good for it sounds so, it's so much to put on a film, but it's very important for the harmoniousness of our country. You know, and I say all the time, the White Australia policy still exists in people's minds, but it really does. When people fantasize about Australia, they fantasize about a beachside paradise where there are no brown people. That's honestly, when Australia goes to bed at night, that's what it fantasizes about. And our film is such a disruption of that, and saying, well, no, we're here too, and this is our country as well. And you know, we don't subscribe to that fantasy. We have an exciting, rich life outside of what gets the limelight and what gets the cinematic treatment in this country.
I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but does that suggest that maybe the powers that be at some of the filmmaking bodies, it is governed too much by a certain section of the population, that there isn't enough representation?
Oh, I mean, I don't think that's not a controversial statement.
Okay, that is, I guess that's
water, in other news, water is wet. Like, I really just want to put it this way: as a white person, you can make a film in this country and never have to cross-check it with a person of color, but the reverse isn't true. It's very hard for me to make a film where I don't have a person not from my cultural background, you know, imposing what they think an audience is going to like or not like. And that's, you know, I think that's kind of the big one. I mean, there's reports every year about that. Screen Australia did their own report about how bad representation was. Like, it's not a controversial statement to say, but it is changing. And I just really want to say, we did have some champions at Screen Australia and at the ABC, and people who really, really fought hard for this film. And so, you know, I think things are changing, but yeah, it's just very embedded for a long time. And it's had to come kicking and screaming. Like, the word white upsets people. Pointing out that there are lots of white people in a room upsets people. So we have to move beyond that, because we have to have the more meaningful conversation about, well, you know, how do we make films that are actually, if Australians don't connect with the films, they're not going to go see them. And that's what's happened. The industry's had to come kicking and screaming, realizing that they need to tell stories from multicultural perspectives, because they were telling stories about people in Bondi fucking each other, like white people in Bondi having sex with each other. Yeah. That was the only story they told for many, many years, and nobody was interested. Funny that. And they finally turned around and gone, oh, okay, well, let's tell these really interesting intergenerational stories about people in Western Western Sydney. And, you know, funnily enough, people are responding well to the film. And I just hope that that translates. I don't want people to see the film out of the corner of their eye and go, oh, look, that looks really interesting. I'll go see that at some point. And then by the time they go to the cinema, it's done its run. Like I'm really commanding everybody, like, just make a concerted effort, put it in your diary. We get released February 3rd. If you live in Western Sydney, go to your favorite Western Sydney restaurant, because where all the good food is, and make a night of it, because then more films like this will get made. And, you know, we're only a fraction of the people of Western Sydney. There's 2.1 million people in Western Sydney. We are just 8 cultures. Yeah. And there are so many more. And I want to see more films from our region. I'm
into that. You've made a wonderful film. You're part of this incredible creative collective that have given the people of Western Sydney, and I'm a Parramatta boy from way back, so I
love it. Oh, bro, you should have told me you were hood. I would have had such a different conversation with you.
No, that's fine. This one's been good. This is good.
We talk to each other in a different way, though. Like, it's in a good way. Like, it's good. Oh, love it. You're a Para boy. Love it.
Yeah. Look, congratulations so much on the film. It's wonderful to talk to you, Bina, and yes, you're absolutely right. We will be fighting for this film to be seen by as many people as possible.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Thank you, Simon, for having me. It's been really great.
Thanks, Bina. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.